Hey everybody, this is Emily from Life Enrichment, here to do another video for you all today. And today I'm doing something a little bit different than what I normally do. For those of you who know me, you know how much I love musical theater. It's one of my biggest passions. And you may also know that one of my favorite musicals is the Tony Award-winning Hamilton from the 2016 Tony year. You may not know this, but Hamilton is based on the true story of Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of this country, about his political pursuits, his triumphs and failures in his work and personal life. In the musical, you learn a little bit about Alexander's wife, Eliza Schuyler, as well as her sisters, Angelica and Peggy. These were obviously real people that existed in the 18th century during the American Revolution, and I decided today to teach you a little bit more about the Schuyler sisters than what the musical tells you. This presentation is called Best of Wives and Best of Women. This is a song from the musical Hamilton, and we'll go in a little bit later about where that name comes from. So today I'll be telling you all about the Schuyler sisters. So to start off, I wanted to show you some pictures of how the Schuyler sisters have been represented on the Broadway stage. All the way on the far left, we have the original Broadway casting of the Schuyler sisters. Renee Elise Goldsberry is the center, Angelica. Then we have on the left, Eliza in blue, portrayed by Philippa Sue. And then we have Peggy, portrayed by Jasmine Cephas Jones. The other pictures we have here are different women that have portrayed these characters on the Broadway stage, as well as in professional productions in the touring company in Chicago. So now that we've seen what they've looked like on stage, I'll show you what these women look like in real life. So these are real portraits of the Schuyler sisters. Again, we have the eldest sister, Angelica, on the far left, the middle sister, Eliza, or Elizabeth, in the center, and then we have Peggy, the youngest sister, on the far right. And these are what they really looked like. So later we'll go into a little bit more about their lives, where they came from. But for now I want to show you the song, The Schuyler Sisters, from the musical Hamilton. Now this is a presentation that the Broadway cast did at the White House some years ago when Hamilton first started. So this is a song from the musical, The Schuyler Sisters, and it gives you a little bit of insight into what the lives of these women were like during the Revolution, what they were seeking, and what they were doing during this time. So again, this is the song, The Schuyler Sisters.
Nothing rich folks love more than going downtown and slumming it with the poor. They pull up in their carriages and gawk at the students in the common just to watch them talk. Take Philip Schuyler, the man is loaded. Uh-oh, but little does he know that his daughters, Peggy, Angelica, Eliza, sneak into the city just to watch all the guys.
Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, Schuyler sisters. Angelica, Peggy, Eliza, what? Daddy said to be home by sundown. Daddy doesn't need to know. Daddy said not to go downtown. Like I said, you're free to go. But look around, the revolution's happening in New York. Work. It's bad enough Daddy wants to go to war. People shouting in the square. It's bad enough there'll be violence on our shore. New ideas in the air. Look around, Angelica, remind me what we're looking for. She's looking for me. Eliza, I'm looking for a mind and work. I'm looking for a mind and work. I'm looking for a mind and work. Work.
Woo! There's nothing like summer in the city. Someone in a rush next to someone looking pretty. Excuse me, miss, I know it's not funny, but your perfume smells like your daddy's got money. Why you slumming in the city in your fancy heels? You searching for an urchin who can give you ideals?
Sir, you disgust me.
So you disgust me. I'm a trust fund, baby, you can trust me.
I've been reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. So men say that I'm intense or I'm insane. You want a revolution, I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'ma compel him to include women in the sequel. Look around, look how lucky we Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world. Just look around and look around. Perfectly that I'm taking New York. New York. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world. Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, the Schuyler sisters. We're looking for a mind at work. Hey, hey, in the greatest city, in the greatest city in the world.
Alright, so the main lesson there is that they were looking for a mind at work. They were from a wealthy family, and at that time, the main thing that women needed to do was seek out husbands that could support them financially. But the Schuyler sisters, they also valued intelligence, so they were looking for smart men that they could, that could challenge their wits. So a little bit about the Schuyler family. The Schuyler family were wealthy Dutch landowners that settled in the Americas around the mid-1600s in Albany, New York. They actually live very close to where I'm from, so this is something I'm very passionate about as their family. Their father was the Continental Army General Philip Schuyler. He was a Revolutionary War general, and he also fought in the French and Indian War. Their mother's name was Catherine, or Kitty Van Rensselaer Schuyler, and she was a descendant of Kilian Van Rensselaer, who was one of the founders of New Netherlands. New Netherlands was the name for New York before the English took over the country. So again, they were one of the first settlers here when it was just the Dutch before the English. The Van Rensselaer family, they owned the manor of Rensselaerswyck, and they were one of the richest and most politically influential families in New York. So their mother was from a very dominant family in the area, and their father was as well. And their parents had 15 children, 8 of which lived to adulthood. So today we're just going to talk about the female children, the sisters, the Schuyler sisters. So I'm going to start off with the youngest sisters, which are Cornelia and Catherine Schuyler. Now you noticed I haven't mentioned them previously, and that is because they are not in the musical Hamilton. They were born at the very start of the Revolution, so they didn't really play a major role in the events that were going on. Whereas the Schuyler sisters that are in the musical, Angelica, Peggy, and Eliza, they were all young women at the time, so they were actively involved in the revolution, and they saw change and saw the revolution as it was happening, whereas Cornelia and Catherine did not. But we'll still talk about them nonetheless. So I'll start with Cornelia. Her full name ended up being Cornelia Schuyler Morton. She was born December 22nd, 1775, at the very beginning of the Revolution. She started her education a little bit later. She started with her younger sister, Catherine, and she started later than her other siblings due to, the dangers of war that were going on. Once things had settled down a little bit, she started her education. Philip, her father, once wrote to Angelica to say that she was assiduous as ever and already a good historian, so she was a very smart girl. She was beautiful, elegant, and very popular, but she was also feisty, flirtatious, and confident, so she had quite a great personality. She ended up eloping with a lawyer named Washington Morton against her father's wishes, which ended up becoming a pretty common thing for her and her sisters. Cornelia had 5 children before she died of illness in 1808. There isn't really a lot known about her. She didn't really have an active political life like her elder sisters. So that's really all I know about her. Then we have Catherine Schuyler Malcolm Cochran. She was born February 1781. She was the youngest child of the Schuyler family, the last of the 15. And she was well known for being the godchild of George Washington. That was even a nickname of her. They would call her the goddaughter of George Washington. She married first Samuel Bayard Malcolm, who was the son of a war officer. She married him in 1803, and she had 4 children with him before he died in 1817. A couple years later, she met and married another man, James Cochrane, who was a lawyer and a politician. He was also her first cousin and her father's wartime compatriot, so he knew him well. And Catherine ended up passing away in August of 1857 in Oswego, New York, so a little bit further south than Albany, where she was from. And again, she didn't really have an active political life, so really this is all that I was able to find about her as well. So now we'll go into the sisters that we do know, and we'll start off with the sister that we know as Peggy. Her full name was Margarita Schuyler Van Rensselaer, again known as Peggy. She was born September 19th of 1758, and she was the 3rd child of the Schuyler family after Angelica and Eliza. On August 1st, 1781, there was a group of loyalists, people that were loyal to the English government, that were looking for her father. They broke into her home. They broke into their home on the Schuyler mansion, looking for her father. And Peggy, while protecting her baby sister, Catherine, she lied and told them that her father had already left the building, he knew that they were coming, and that he went to alert the town of their coming. And so that forced the invaders to flee, and Peggy was basically a hero. A couple years later, in June of 1783, she eloped with her distant cousin, Stephen Van Rensselaer III, who was only 19 at the time. Now, some of their family members thought that he was too young to marry, but for the most part, they all agreed that the marriage would end up helping his career, marrying a Schuyler, and marrying, a descendant of Van Rensselaer herself. A couple years after they were married, he inherited and became Lord of the Van Rensselaer Manor at the age of 21, and she ended up having 3 children with him, only one of whom lived to adulthood, and that was Stephen Van Rensselaer the 4th. Now, Peggy became ill in 1799, and she ended up passing away on March 14th, 1801. While in Albany for business, her confidant, friend, and brother-in-law, Alexander Hamilton, he stayed with her at her bedside as she passed away, and he was the one that reported her death to her sister Eliza. He wrote to her, "On Saturday, my dear Eliza, your sister took leave of her sufferings and friends, I trust, to find repose and happiness in a better country." Alexander had quite a way with words. He was an excellent writer, and so that was a very sentimental way of letting her know what had happened. They were living in New York City at the time, and so he was the only one that was, in the area in Albany when her sister Peggy passed away. So now we'll move on to Angelica. Angelica's full name was Angelica Schuyler Church, and she was the oldest of the Schuyler children. I wanted to show you a video from the musical Hamilton of Angelica because she is one of the more prominent secondary figures. Again, this is Renee Elise Goldsberry. She won for Best Featured Actress in a Musical this year in 2016 when Hamilton was nominated. This is just a short clip from one of her big songs, which is called Satisfied. Unfortunately, it's not the whole song, but it'll just be a nice little snippet.
All right, that's what I'm talking about. Now everyone give it up for the maid of honor, Angelica Schuyler.
A toast to the groom,
To the groom, to the groom, to the groom,
to the bride,
to the bride.
from your sister,
Angelica,
always by your side.
So unfortunately, I can't show you the whole clip because there isn't one online. But I just wanted to show you a little bit about her song in this musical, which is Satisfied, and we'll go into a little bit about what that song is in a bit. So again, Angelica Schuyler Church. She was the eldest child of the Schuyler family, born February 20th of 1756. She met many prominent figures that visited her father, including John Barker Church, who was a wealthy British-born merchant with whom she eloped in 1777 and subsequently had 8 children. Again, like I said previously, eloping was a very common thing for the Schuyler sisters. Most of them eloped without their father's blessing, knowing that he didn't necessarily approve of the men they were with. But most of them chose wealthy men, so it ended up being okay in the long run. So she married a wealthy man who, again, he was from Britain, so she traveled there a lot. And she traveled with him all over. She became a member of the social elite, not only in her hometown of Albany, but also in New York City, in Paris, and in London. She corresponded with many popular figures, including Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, the Marquis de Lafayette, and her brother-in-law and potential lover Alexander Hamilton. So many people think that she and Hamilton were lovers based on things that they wrote in their letters, showing a lot of sentiment towards each other. The song that I just showed you, although we weren't able to see the whole thing, is mostly about showing her perspective from their wedding, having regrets that she's not the one that's marrying Alexander. And although it's not portrayed in the musical, she was actually already married by the time Alexander and Eliza met and married. So she never really had a chance to marry him anyway. But the author of Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda, he wanted to include that detail in there, that it was possible that the two were actually lovers, or at least they did have romantic feelings for each other. While living in London, again, she lived in a lot of different big cities. She engaged socially with the Prince of Wales, who later became King George IV, along with famous authors and painters of the era. Again, she was a member of the elite. She was a very intelligent woman who was very well read, and so she was able to have a repartee with a lot of these popular figures. Her husband was a member of Parliament at one time, and during his service in Parliament, she went back to the States so that she could attend the inauguration of George Washington, a pretty major event. Her son ended up acquiring land in New York that he later renamed the town of Angelica, which still exists today. She did a lot of help for Eliza with her philanthropic work, which we'll go into a little bit later. She helped Eliza until her own death on March 6th, 1814, and she ended up being buried near Alexander, her nephew Philip, who had already passed, and later Eliza was buried there as well, at St. Trinity's in New York. So the last sister that we're going to talk about is the most prominent sister, which is Elizabeth or Eliza Schuyler Hamilton. So I'll start off with a video of a song from Hamilton, so you get a little bit of Eliza's perspective in this song. This is a song called That Would Be Enough. This is when Eliza first finds out that she's pregnant and with their first child, and she's begging Alexander to consider her life when he makes his decisions. You know, he's very set on this revolution and wanting to fight, but she asks him, you know, please just do what you can to stay alive because I need you and your country needs you. And this is an ad, so I'm going to skip
give me a
this.
wedgie. Am I good? So.
Okay.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. Look around.
How long have you known?
A month or so.
Eliza, you should have told me.
I wrote to the general a month ago.
No.
I begged him to send you home.
You should have told me.
I'm not sorry. I knew you'd fight until the war was
War's
won.
not done.
But you deserve a chance to meet your son. Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Will you relish being a poor man's wife, unable to provide for your life?
I relish being your wife. Look around, look around. Look at where you are. Look at where you started. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. Just stay alive, that would be enough. And if this child shares a fraction of your smile, or a fragment of your mind, look outward, that would be enough. I don't pretend to know the challenges you're facing, the worlds you keep erasing and creating in your mind. But I'm not afraid. I know who I married. So long as you come home at the end of the day, that would be enough. We don't need a legacy. We don't need money. If I could grant you peace of mind, if you could let me inside your heart, oh, let me be a part of the narrative in the story they will write someday. Let this moment be the first chapter where you decide to stay. And I could be enough. And we could be enough. That would be enough.
Alright, so that's a little bit from the musical version of Eliza, which is just a fraction of the woman she was. She was quite an extraordinary woman. Alright, so Elizabeth Eliza Schuyler Hamilton. I included a quote here that I think really summarizes her character from James McHenry. He said about her, "Hers was a strong character with its depth and warmth, whether of feeling or temper controlled, but glowing underneath, bursting through at times in some emphatic expression." Elizabeth was an amazing woman, and I'm very excited to talk to you about her today. So we'll start off with her early life. She lived a long life, so there's a lot to share. She was the second child of the Schuyler family, born after her sister Eliza. She was born August 9th of 1757. She learned to read and sew from her mother as her father fought in the French and Indian War. She met Alexander in 1778 and began a relationship with him in 1780, mostly through letters as he fought in the war, before they married in April of that same year with her father's blessing. She was the only one of her sisters that got her father's blessing. And I think the main reason this is because Alexander was not a wealthy man, unlike the men that her sisters married. Alexander was an orphan. He came from an island in the Caribbean. He came from nothing. The people of the island got money together to send him to the Americas so that he could get an education, and he joined the revolution and rose above his station. But he was not a wealthy man, he really came from nothing. So she sought her father's blessing before she married him, but her father knew that he was a smart man, that he was really going somewhere, and so he was the only one that gave his blessing to his daughter. So the couple ended up having 8 children of their own, and they ended up also raising an orphan for 10 years who was the daughter of a friend of theirs. Eliza, she helped Alexander with a lot of his political writings, especially the Federalist Papers, one of the things he's most well known for writing, as well as Washington's Farewell Address, which people may not know Alexander wrote with her help. While she was pregnant with her 6th child, she learned that Alexander was having an affair, and so she fled home to her family. She later returned and reconciled with Hamilton, and they had 2 more children, naming their 8th and final child after their first son, Philip, who had died in a duel the previous year. She stayed by Alexander's side right until the end, along with their children, and when he passed away on July 12, 1804, she was right by his side. She was a very loving and devoted woman, and once she and Hamilton reconciled, she did not waver from this decision. They were very much in love and committed to each other. So the next thing I'm going to show you is a song called Best of Wives and Best of Women, the song I mentioned earlier. Now, I wasn't able to find a video from the Broadway production, but I did find this really cool animation that somebody made, and this is almost exactly what it looks like in the musical version. So we have Alexander. He is deciding that he's going to go to the duel that ends up ending his life. And he's writing a last letter to Eliza before he goes in case he doesn't make it. And this is his goodbye.
Alexander, come back to sleep.
I have an early meeting out of town.
It's still dark outside.
I know. I just need to write something down.
Why do you write like you're running out of time? Come back to bed, that would be enough.
I'll be back before you know I'm gone.
Come back to sleep.
This meeting's at dawn.
Well, I'm going back to sleep.
Hey, best of wives and best of women.
Now, a lot of things in musicals are often, exaggerated or, out of context, but this is almost an exact thing that happened in his final letter to her. So this is from his final letter to Eliza before his death. He wrote a letter before he went to the duel just in case he didn't make it. And in his letter he wrote, "The consolations of religion, my beloved, can alone support you, and these you have a right to enjoy. Fly to the bosom of your God and be comforted. With my last idea, I shall cherish the sweet hope of meeting you in a better world. Adieu, best of wives and best of women. Embrace all my darling children for me." So that was his way of saying goodbye, and I think it was, a beautiful thing to end with. But Eliza, she was blessed with a gift that Hamilton didn't have, and that was the gift of time. She ended up living 50 more years after he passed away. And she did a lot with that time. In 1806, she co-founded the Orphan Asylum Society. She served as president of the society for nearly 30 years. She raised funds, she collected goods, and she educated and cared for over 700 children in her time. The New York Orphan Asylum Society ended up becoming Graham Wyndham, and it still exists today. It still runs as an orphanage today. She was recognized for her philanthropy at the National Museum of American History. She preserved and protected Alexander's legacy, including demanding an apology from James Monroe for his false accusations about Hamilton, which goes into a little bit in the musical. James Monroe and a couple other founding fathers accused Hamilton of embezzling funds from the government, and in order to clear his name, he wrote a letter to the public addressing his affair and saying that the money that they were in question was not money he was stealing from the government, but rather money he was paying the cuckold of the woman he was sleeping with in order to keep him quiet. And he ended up exposing himself. And Eliza, she also defended his legacy by defending Hamilton's authorship of the Washington's Farewell Address. People didn't believe that he was the one that wrote it. And so she, came to his defense and, proved that, she had helped him write it. She collected and published thousands of Alexander's writings. Again, he was a very extensive writer. It was one of his biggest passions. He wrote a lot. And so she organized a lot of these writings into a biography, and she sold a lot of them to the government to put in the Library of Congress. You know, they were very important writings about the government, and he was one of the people that helped create the government. She wore a package around her neck that contained pieces of a sonnet that he wrote for her, showing her love and devotion to him even until her death. She dedicated herself to charity work. She helped to raise funds for the Washington Monument, which, like I said previously, Angelica helped her as well. Towards the end of her life, she suffered from short-term memory loss, but she remembered Alexander and memories of them together very vividly. And she ended up passing away November 9th, 1854, at the age of 97. So she lived a long life, and she did what she knows that Alexander would have wanted her to do, to give back, to be a good citizen, and to make the most of the time that he never got. So the final song in the musical Hamilton is called Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story? And the line goes, you have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? So Eliza took Alexander's life and turned it into a legacy. People say that the reason why the musical Hamilton is called simply Hamilton and not Alexander Hamilton is because it's not only about his life but hers as well. She took his life and turned it into something so much bigger. She turned his name into something of a phenomenon. She devoted herself to charity, to philanthropy, and she did her best to make the most of the time that she had. And so I want to show you the last minute and a half of the musical Hamilton, her little snippet at the end, where she's reflecting on her life. She's reflecting on the choices she made and the things that she did, so that when she got to meet him again in the next life, that she was ready for him, and she lived a life she was proud of. Well, that's not what I wanted.
Can I show you what I'm proudest of? I established the first private orphanage in New York City. I helped raise hundreds of children. I get to see them growing up. In their eyes I see you, Alexander. I see you every time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell my story? Oh, I can't wait to see you again. It's only a matter of time. Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
So that gasp that she does in the end was actually a choice made by the actress Philippa Sue. It's not something written in the script. And every Eliza that has portrayed her on Broadway has a different interpretation of what this gasp means and what it means for them. Some people say that it's her, seeing the light at the end of her life, seeing God, seeing Alexander, seeing the life they made. Or maybe it's her seeing, what the future is, what life is like now, what his legacy has turned into, what Hamilton is like, the musical, how everyone now knows his name, how the work that she put in has raised his name to above his own standards. Eliza was such an important person in history, and such an incredible woman, and someone I really admire. And I hope you all will all enjoy this presentation today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a little something about these real women, about their strength, about their pursuits, about their power. And And I wanted to end off with another video here. Now, I showed you the song The Schuyler Sisters earlier in this presentation. That was the full length of the song. But this is going to be, you know, just a short clip, but I wanted to show you what it looks like on the Broadway stage with the sisters in their full costumes, rather than the White House presentation that I had shown you before. So again, this is the Schuyler Sisters.
And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'ma compel him to include women in the sequel. Work! Look around, and how lucky we are to be alive right now. Look around, and how lucky we are to be alive right now. History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world. 'Cause I've been reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. So many say that I'm intense, that I'm insane. You want a revolution, I want a revelation. Listen to my declaration. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Open up the gate and it glows. Look around, and how lucky we are to be alive right now. History is happening in Manhattan, and we just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world. Angelica, Eliza, and the Schuyler sisters. We're looking for mine at work. Hey, in the greatest city in the world.
So thank you all for watching today. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. I really love the Schuyler Sisters. If you'd like to know more, please let me know. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day. Bye.